Hello and welcome to episode 45 of the Freo Big Footy podcast. Finally moving into September action, and obviously sort of came a little bit early last week with Fremantle going up against Port Adelaide for a top four spot and ending up victorious. And in the end, a sort of cracking third term and start of the fourth term was enough for Fremantle, who kicked 9 goals straight to end up 16 goals 9 105 to 14 goals 13 97. We'll also have obviously a big preview of the upcoming qualifying final against Sydney. But before we get into that, we'll bring in our usual resident expert from Victoria. Seppo, how are you, mate?
I'm good, Centurions, and looking forward to this September. It's going to be a cracking one, and we're all sewn that up with that great victory over Port on the weekend.
Yeah, before we probably get into last week's game, there's obviously been a bit of a debacle tonight with Fremantle and their flight out to Sydney with the boys' flight being cancelled, and now they're obviously not going to be going till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and obviously that'll affect preparations a bit, Seppo.
Yeah, it is. They were due to have a walk around on the ANZ surface tomorrow at 10 a.m, but that's when their flight's due to come in now. So I think, unfortunately, to the 2-hour delay they had on the tarmac, it means they can't get out there tonight, and let's just hope it doesn't affect their preparation. They've already got their last training session in. It just means that the guys probably don't get a good look at the oval before they actually get out there. So it's going to be interesting.
I'm sure that the Sydney, they'll try and at least organise a little bit of a extra time for them in the afternoon, but time will obviously tell on that. So certainly we'll test the old mantra of anywhere, anytime, that's for sure. Obviously last week, Seppo, Fremantle in a tight battle for fourth spot, and there was a few nerves on the line going into the game, with obviously Port having a terrific performance against Carlton the week before, but you just weren't sure what Carlton's form line read like, and obviously lost playing Brisbane. But at the end of the day, the boys came home with the chocolates, and as I said, a 9-0 run in that third quarter, and the start of the fourth was enough to put Port away.
Yeah, it was quite a nervous start, thinking the whole first half, no team really got out anything more than a 12 or 13 point lead. So it was a nice tight contest. The guys really worked for it, and that passages of play in the third quarter where we broke away was just once again some of our best footy, but we've never seen a full 4 quarters. So maybe they are just holding something in a tank, knowing what to do at the right time, and let's just hope we can come up with some 4 quarter performances like what we saw in that amazing run, because Port came us that hard at the end. You think once we got out to close to a 45 point lead, you think they had that done and dusted, and Port came back and pushed really hard to scale that margin right back. Did get a bit nervous, the rate they scored at the end, but it was interesting to note that they actually ran out of interchanges. I think it was 4 minutes or 5 minutes on the clock right into that last. So, of course, to have I think the guys left on the bench were 2 or 3 midfielders. I think Barlow, Neal, and one other was stuck on the bench. So it did make it quite interesting to finish. And one of the first times I can remember an AFL side actually running out of interchanges that far out from the end.
Yeah, it was interesting. The spin Lion put on it as well, saying it was sort of a pre-planned type thing, which doesn't sound, certainly doesn't sound like Ross Lyon. But it was interesting. They actually were quite a bit over the mantra even at half time. I think they're sitting on about 72, 73 interchanges. So maybe it was just a case of trying to get those matchups right. And I suppose the upside was at that half time break, Seppo, was the fact that really none of our guns had fired at all. Like Mundy was very quiet. Ballantyne didn't even have a touch. Just a few of our sort of regular contributors just weren't playing that well, and you knew they couldn't play that poorly for a full game. And the fact that we're only really 1 point down, and if Taberner kicked that goal at the half-time break, we would have gone in front. So, but as you said, Port came hard at the end there, and you sort of wonder if there was any value in. I know that Port liked to run it out, but the fact was the game was pretty much over, and they could have certainly used it. Whether you need that energy this week against Richmond, time will tell. But at the end of the day, we got the 4 points. The top 4 was secure, and it'll all be on for this week.
And it was just great to see that first quarter performance of, like I said, a lot of players were down on form, but guys like Taberner and Neal, and a lot of the younger guys really stepped up, and it was fun to see that tale of two halves where some of those guys were down on form. They came into their own on that third quarter, and Mundy and Hill started to get a lot more of the ball after really struggling up until half time. And it was just a great work to see both Walters and Ballantyne team up a couple of times and do great work in that forward half. And it's just amazing what Walters can do for our side, and some of that end-to-end footy was just brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the performance once again of Taberner in the first half has just given us that little bit better structure and able to sort of straighten us up a little bit. And once again, he was able to provide a bit of a target in that first half when we were struggling to kick a bit of a score, and just quieted down a bit in the second half. But I thought his first half performance was strong again, and once he's able to play out sort of 4 quarters, he'll certainly be an asset to our forward line, even more than he is probably now. As you said, another pleasing performance, Seppo, was of Lockie Neal. I know he sort of went head-to-head a bit with Robbie Gray at times, but then they sort of moved Ebert onto him in the second quarter, and that quieted him down a bit. But when they let him off the chain, he was sort of definitely racking up 13, 14 touches at a time. So,
and he finished on 34, which was the top disposal getter for that game. And I think he's done it a couple of times this year already. Lockie Neal finished with most times with the pill, so it's great to see that he can rack it up. And it was really a sort of a testament to his game that he sort of worked through that bit of attention he got. And in the end, Gray got a lot of it too. But in the end, we'll probably be happy with Neal's performance and the fact that Crowley did a fantastic job. And I think he even picked up a coach's vote award for the job he did on Boak. It was pretty good because Boak had 22 in the end, but obviously I don't remember many of them, and they didn't actually look that damaging. So I think Crowley did quite a good job in the end.
Yeah, I mean, most of them came in the last sort of half, and probably, in fairness, probably they had the upside on the other end of the tagging with Kane Corns really keeping Hilly quiet. And he looked sort of went back to his old days of sort of not being able to sort of break that tag. But it was interesting that when we sort of in the third quarter, when we were sort of looking for a way to break it open, that they moved Hill into the centre of the ground, and then rather than sort of Port having their ideal centre square matchups in there, by moving Hill in there, they sort of forced Corns to go in the middle there, and it just sort of probably helped us a little bit, just get a little bit, Mundy get a little bit more space in the centre square, and he sort of came a little bit stronger when that happened. But as you said, a few of those guys. I mean, I thought Pearce was quite good with his disposal as well. He sort of got his inside 50s, and a couple of those kicks were quite long and obviously to advantage. And that kick he hit Pav, where Pav kicked it from the near the 50 there, was just centimetre perfect, so to speak. It was sort of more of what you want to see from Pearce.
That was the one thing I noticed during the game was the actual distance on his kicks. When he's actually got a bit of time and space, he must be one of the leading sort of metres gained in our team. The way he just roosts the ball upfield when he's got a bit of time and space. Don't ask him to have a set shot at goal or anything, but if he can pump it inside 50 and do it with speed, that's what we've been about this year. And I've heard a couple of interviews about our forward movements, all have been about doing it quicker. He's certainly a part of that, and great to see him getting that time and space to put it on the end of Pab and Taverner.
Yeah, the other player who sort of impressed me quite a lot on the weekend, obviously, was Mzungu again. I thought his ability to sort of work between the 50s, and especially in that third quarter, even the last quarter, his ability to sort of find space in the 50, and he did a couple of really good, strong spoils, and just his ability to, as a run-with player, you really notice it when he's not playing for us, and I thought he was strong once again on the weekend.
Certainly stepped up in the absence of Fife as another one that's around and in with the ball and getting in, doing a bit of the heavy work and running. So it's great to see, like you said, that running between the two 50-metre arcs, and he's very good overhead as well, and that's going to come into play this week, I reckon.
Yeah, obviously the big news out of the whole game was probably the fact that obviously losing Michael Johnson for the entire final series was a big blow for Fremantle, and obviously his ability to sort of not only sort of work well in the defence but sort of be that intercept marker. And although I think he has struggled probably for the last month, I don't think it's sort of been a one-off thing. And his kicking, as we've mentioned on the pod before, hasn't been probably up to the standard we normally expect Seppo. But I mean, regardless, he's still going to be a massive loss, and I'm sure the coaching committee has probably spent countless hours and nights trying to work out what they're going to do in that back 50.
Yeah, certainly. But to turn a down into a positive, it's great that we've actually got Silvani, and he had the week off being a laid out due to a match-up. And it was one thing I did struggle to think at the start of the game, why didn't we actually take out Johnson and give Silvani the run. But in hindsight now that we did try and play Johnson, he worked through it, and he was definitely carrying something over the last few weeks that I've mentioned. But I suppose now that we're bringing in a fresh Silvani, and obviously with Dawson, I just feel like you need one more in there. But now it's a job for someone else to step up. But one of the big highlights that we haven't touched on yet was Zach Dawson's mark, and it's something he'd usually leap up and put a big spoil into, but he got straight up there, and unfortunately for him, dished it off to Walters, who wasn't ready to take the handball. But his actual mark of the year nomination is actually doing quite well overall. So he's done something great, and it's not often he's kicked a goal this year that's claimed a highlight. So he's got a couple of career highlights all in the space this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, I think Walters was probably still shocked by the fact he took that mark. And and speaking of that, obviously with Dawson getting the goal of the year, I think Lachie Neale was also in line for Player of the Round as well. So, which is probably the first time we've seen him in that sort of, sort of company, so to speak. So, congratulations to him as well. And I think he's sort of just still coming to better and better as he goes along. And I mean, the fact he's still only 21 is, definitely a plus for our midfield into the future. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Any other sort of points you want to bring up, Seppo, before we move on with this one?
Yeah, nothing really from that game. I think we've covered it, and the best thing is that we did win it, got the double chance finishing fourth now, because it could have so easily gone the other way, and we could be looking at something else. But I'm just glad we got the result and finished fourth.
Yeah, I think the other probably crucial part out of the game in the end, Seppo, was the fact that Ibbotson looked like he was sort of playing waffle for the first quarter, and just looked that lackadaisical self that he can be, and just struggled to come with the tempo of the game. But he certainly improved as the game went on, and obviously going to be crucial for us now if we want to make any sort of dent into September, being that ability to play tall. The other probably interesting one was with Subin and Crozier, and obviously Crozier being the sub, and Subin just manages just not to be able to string those four quarters together. He has a really strong performance one week and then just isn't able to back it up quite so much the next week. And obviously he's been sort of diagnosed with an ankle injury, which may explain something, but it's a bit disappointing for him as well.
Certainly.
All right. During the, obviously, Peel obviously played their last game of the round this week against South Fremantle. Ended up going down 14 goals, 20, 104 to 10-14, 74. And although the result really didn't make any difference to Peel's season, I mean, there was a couple of highlights with De Boer having 35 touches and, a couple of our sort of regulars like Ballard getting 30. Morabito was a bit quiet with only 10 touches, and which is a bit disappointing for him. But good to see Sheridan once again getting a bit of the pill with 24. But probably a bigger concern for Fremantle, Seppo, is the fact that now that this alignment's in place with Peel not making the finals, we won't have any of our sort of reserves players playing anything for probably the next 2 to 3 weeks, which will make it a little bit difficult if they're required to come up and play without having to play for 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah, it certainly makes it hard for the guys that are outside of the 22 at the moment to push for a case, and it means that they can only do it on the training track. And it's certainly hard with the alignment with Peel finishing where they are, that there's no more games. But I suppose that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's just hope that Peel's sort of alignment sort of structures gets a little bit stronger next year. And I think if they can manage to I think they've got a bit of better mix between the forwards and the mids, all the talls and the mids. But if they can get that mix a little bit better, I think it will make Fremantle more, or the Peel Thunder Waffle side, a bit more competitive come next year. And obviously, Cam Shepherd's been named the coach again next year, which is a bit of an interesting call. If you certainly speak to some of the people down that way, Seppo, there was a few eyebrows raised when he got the position again for another year, but only time will tell whether that's been a good call or not, I suppose. And he's only had the 1 year in there, but he certainly, I think, coaches the way Fremantle want them to play, which I suppose is part of the deal. But it certainly probably doesn't make Peel all that much more competitive at times.
Yes, hopefully they bring some through the draft and get some other people around our regulars that are down there that actually helps the Peel actually get results, because I don't think it's just more than coaching down there. It's a bit more about that team structure that's going to help them develop over a period of time. Absolutely.
All right, and the other, obviously we're moving on now to the more important stuff, Seppo, which is obviously the first qualifying final. And Obviously, Fremantle have three big ins coming into the side with Silvani, Fife, and a bit of a curveball with Jonathan Griffin being named, even though he was in one of the best for Peel last week. And going out of the side, we've just talked about was Michael Johnson with the back, Nick Subin with the ankle, and Crozier has been omitted. And for the Sydney side, Seppo?
Yeah, they've made 5 changes. They've brought back in arrested Kennedy, Franklin, Pike, Bird, and McGlynn. And outs for them are basically all omitted, none through injury. So Biggs, Towers, Mitchell, Naismith, and Jones all coming out of their side. So, and their emergencies, they're lining up with Laidler, Mitchell, and Towers. So some handy players there on the bench for them if they need them.
Yeah, and Fremantle's emergencies obviously are De Boer, Crozier, and Pearce, and obviously all three emergencies have flown across this. Well, they will fly across the Sydney Seppo once they eventually get on the plane. But yeah, it's interesting that obviously with no Peel game, so no one's really missing any football as such. And you know, it's definitely the. I mean, I suppose we can start with the elephant in the room, so to speak, with the Jonathan Griffin sort of one. I must admit, at the end of last week, I don't know if it was noticeable on the telly, Seppo, but particularly after Sandlands took that strong mark against Wingard on the boundary there, he just sort of pulled up a little bit proppy, and I know both him and Pav were in getting some scans this week on the Monday or Tuesday, so hopefully there's nothing too major there, but let's hope that obviously Sandlands there, you really can't see them playing, especially if it is a bit wet, going in with 3 ruckmen.
Yeah, it certainly does seem strange that we are naming 3 ruckmen. It's not like the positions like if we did want to have Sandlands rested, you'd think they might even leave him in WA if they weren't sure about it. But Griffin named suspects that we're probably going to go with a late change or assess the weather. And well, if you consider him even just named, we've still got De Boer as a mid, Crozier as a forward, and Alex Pearce as a defender, a tall defender there as options. So obviously we will decide probably right up until the game, have a look at the surface maybe and see which way we're going to go. But I really struggle to see, and the only way they can do it is Ross floated the idea of having Zach Clark-Black. So have Sandlands and Griffin maybe to outpoint Pike in the middle and play Griffin as a forward and maybe drop Clark back. So it's a more athletic and mobile type over and maybe playing on a resting ruckman of Sydney's. So.
Yeah, I mean, the key, I think, obviously, the weather is going to make a big decision on who that final position is. I know, Ibbotson, Barlow, and Neil are going to play. So there's no, so you'd have to think whoever, I mean, the interesting thing, I suppose, if we look at it that way as well, Seppo, is that if Griffin does play, I mean, you're not going to play Griffin as a sub.
No.
So, and I mean, Ibbotson's not the sort of player you would consider to be in a sub role either. So therefore, you're really looking at, do we go with someone like Barlow or Lockie Neal in a sub role? And that just doesn't seem a plausible option for mine. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, it's very hard when you actually look around everyone named on there. When you've got the other younger guys, if you automatically think about subbing or having someone start with a green vest, and Sutcliffe hasn't worn the vest all year, I believe. You've got Taberner, who doesn't really suit the sub role, and it's almost pointing towards Neil, but it's very hard to pick a sub out of the guys that are actually named on the field at the moment. And it's pretty hard to do, but I wouldn't put it past. I think Ibboson's actually had the vest before in one of our games, but you'd think we'd need him with his height to play against Sydney and their taller forward structure. So it is a hard one to pick, but you could see if De Boer or Crozier did come into the side for the Griffin, that one of those two would make just the perfect sub to come in.
Yeah, I mean, that's an obvious. I think that's pretty obvious, isn't it, for us? So, as you said, if Griffin goes out, which I still think will happen, then De Boer or Crozier will certainly be named as the sub in that role. And because you'd have to think, as I said, in terms of the other ones. And I know Ibbotson did play it once this year, but that was still coming back off his injury. So they probably just wanted to only give him a bit of a short run. But yeah, it would certainly be a tough side. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk this week about the Sydney forward line, and obviously when you look at it on the paper, it's certainly a very imposing type side when you look at the likes of Tippett, Franklin, but even then they've still got pace with Jeddah. McVeigh can do the job. Then you've got Sam Reid and Goods as well. So there's certainly and when the guys are like McGlynn and those sort of blokes running through there as well, it's going to be a tough job for the defence, and really they have to. It can't be just those 6 blokes down the back, Seppo. We've got to probably play team defense like we haven't played before, really, to be a chance of knocking them off.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a tough ask, and I've got confidence that Dawson and Silvani are going to do a great job. And I think Silvani's had a couple of jobs before on Franklin over the period of time when he was at Hawks. So that's a nice matchup there that you think Silvani will go with that centre half back position and run with whoever's playing up the field. But I think it's going to be quite interesting with the weather, what type of an effect. And I'm not sure if I've been reading on the Sydney board about their confidence in the wet, that what type of impact Franklin, Tippett and Goods will actually have. And I just wonder how they'll actually go and whether they'll actually be damaging if they do decide to make a late change as well, because they've certainly got Reed there as well. But I wonder if there's a late change on the cards for them as well, if it does end up being a afternoon shower, and they're talking only a couple of mil, but there's quite a chance that the actual showers will come right at the time of the start of the game.
Yeah, I mean, the other interesting thing will be down the other end of the ground as well. I mean, Ted Richards is going to pick up Pav, because that's sort of always been the traditional matchup there. But obviously there was a bit of a scare running through Sydney today with Heath Grundy and his calf, and he would be the obvious matchup you'd think for Taberner. Now, Taberner loves to run, and he'll certainly run Grundy around as much as he possibly can. But if Grundy doesn't get up, I mean, obviously then it forces them to use Sam Reid in that defensive role, probably more than likely. So it does take a little bit away if Grundy isn't able to get up in that position. And then obviously they will. It'll be interesting to see how they use Sam Reid on the night if Fremantle do go that way.
Yeah, certainly. It's one area we can not sort of get them out, because they're Richards and Grundy are great defenders, and I think Pav's actually been held quite well with combination of those two over the past few meetings. So, but Taberner has certainly stood up now against the taller defenders he's had to play on. So hopefully he can do the job and perform quite well on this big stage.
Yeah, I mean, the other interesting matchup will be certainly the Reece Shaw Hayden Ballantyne matchup as well, Seppo. Obviously, most of us will remember probably the fact that Ballantyne not only got reported once but twice in that game against Reece Shaw, and I mean whether they were debatable at best certainly when you look at some of the other decisions that have occurred through the year. But let's leave that one alone for now. But there certainly will be a little bit of niggle between the two of them, you'd have to think, when the ball bounces on Saturday.
Yeah, certainly. And the other thing they've got is two great defenders in Rampy and Smith as well. And I think Smith's earned a spot in the All-Australian side as a small defender. So they certainly take our small forwards to task with Walters and Ballantyne. So it'll be interesting if Rampy and Smith do get the jobs on those two, or if Shaw takes one of them, or if they're using Shaw and Malcheski for more of that rebounding half-back role. Most certain too. If we do bring De Boer into the side, it's a perfect job for him to take on one of those guys like Malcheski or Shaw.
Do you think Shaw might, as you said, who do you think will get the job on Main then? Obviously Main's going to be that other sort of player. Like, do you think Malcheski will do that sort of role on Main, or?
You'd think so, being a slightly taller defender than the other two. But it might be that we put Main on Shaw as well. So you never know how those match up. It's probably the hardest area to pick at the moment. And even just how we structure up with how deep that Main plays, or if he plays higher up the ground, or if we need to drop him back to counteract the tall forwards of Sydney.
Yeah, I mean, the other sort of, where we talk about most of the time, the games are won and lost in the midfield. And obviously last year Fremantle sort of pulled a bit of a masterstroke in the end with the use of Crowley on Kieran Jack, who just sort of really struggled to have an impact with the hard Crowley tag. And it'll be interesting to see if, because obviously earlier in the year they used Crowley on Hanbury, and Hanbury sort of probably got a hold of him a bit and kicked 4 goals on him. So it'll be interesting to see which way Lyon runs and who he decides to go with in this case. I mean, they've certainly got a number of players or options that whether they look at a Luke Parker as well, because he generally sort of flies under the radar a little bit. So it'd be interesting to see how Lyon uses Crowley on the weekend.
Well, I think it's interesting with the Parker matchup, because Parker's one that is almost like the untaggable, or one that you'd probably want to run head-to-head, and a player like Mzungu, I reckon, would be perfect for someone like Parker to be able to run everywhere, because he seems to play a bit on the ball and go forward. He's great overhead. He's probably sits in my top 3 of non-Freo players to watch. I just love the way that Parker plays, and he's he's had a cracking year, and he's certainly quite damaging when he goes forward. And it's a job that I'd rather want to see Mzungu or someone else. You'd think that um, Kennedy will probably run head to head with Mundy, and Crowley would probably want to take someone damaging like Hanbury or one of the other guys. It couldn't really. It is an option, and obviously the logical one went last week to the boat tag. So you'd think that maybe Ross will send Crowley to Hanbury or one of those other damaging guys, but Parker is an option.
Yeah, I mean the other interesting thing will be who they go with on Fife as well. Like as you said, if you go Fife and Parker head to head, Seppo, obviously Fife would be able to drag Parker forward, and he probably has a bit of an advantage there in the wet. And obviously Fife will be certainly keen to amend after missing the last couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see in which way Sydney decide to who they play on Fife, or whether they go head to head in that regard, or whether they do try and play a bit of a tagging role on him. The other obviously key matchup for Fremantle in the way they will look at and will be the way obviously Jerry McVeigh, who is another player who's and obviously Sydney don't have too many poor players out there, to be honest. Let's be frank, but McVeigh's one of those guys who can easily rack it up pretty quickly, and I think Lyon will be spending quite a bit of time determining on the best way to nullify him, particularly if he's playing across that half-back line and setting up play from there. Any other sort of matchups? Who do you think? Do you think they'll go head-to-head with Rowan and Hill, both speedsters, and in that regard?
It'd be a great matchup. I think last time we actually met earlier in the year, I'm not sure if Stephen had a direct opponent or if we really took on Jeddah, or I can't remember if Rowan was playing for them at that time, but it's certainly one thing in the wet. I don't have full confidence that Hill's going to be too damaging on a wet, sloppy track, but it'd be one that they can probably afford to let the likes of Rowan and Jeddah go on the, especially down the wings. The condition of this ANZ Stadium, if you can cast your mind back to that Sydney Carlton final last year, where they're talking about replacing sections of these pitches and get the ground prepared, but it is going to be a bit of a slop on the wings. So I just wonder how the players will hold their feet, and especially when the actual pace of the game might be a bit of a slogfest. We probably won't see the best from Jeddah and Hill and Rowan and even Sutcliffe, the way the guys run and like that big open and quick pace game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and that probably brings us to probably you'd probably arguably say, Seppo, our biggest advantage, pardon the pun, but obviously in the ruck, with Sandilands going up against Pike, and obviously Pike didn't play last week and they're going to get him cherry right, but the fact is that they don't really have a second ruckman. I know Tippett will probably end up playing that second ruck type role, but you'd have to think we'd have a bit of an advantage there, particularly if it is going to be wet and there's going to be a lot of hit-outs. The fact is that at least we'll be able to dictate where those hit-outs go more so than where if Sydney have the advantage with Pike, which he does on some weeks.
Yeah, it certainly makes a big difference when we're actually winning the ball in the midfield. And when Sandlands is on song, we've got a Fife who plays well in the wet. You've got Barlow, who's practically a duck, loves the wet. And Mundy as well, the bigger body, is just going to help if we can get Sandilands and Griffin, if he's playing, or even Clark, to feed the ball down to those after stoppage. I'm sure Sydney want to play the same way as well and not try and get too much loose ball on the outside and let it go. So it'll be quite interesting actually how they structure up, or if they're going to. It's happened a couple of times where they're just conceding the ruck tap and just watching Sandy's hand to where it's going to go. It'll be quite interesting setup, because you get a bit nervous when you're just that confident you're going to beat the other ruckman of what's going to happen. I think I've seen a couple of games where it's gone that way, but if we can get the guys underneath performing well, and I think Fife's going to come like a bull out of the gate after his 2 weeks off. It's going to be great to watch that chemistry again of Sandlands, Mundy and Fife and Barlow all at the stoppages, just constantly getting the ball, pushing it forward onto Walters and Ballots. That's the way we're going to win the game, I reckon. If we can do that, we're in for a good game. Yeah,
I mean, obviously they're predicting rain today, tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, so it's certainly not going to be a quick across the ground type game. So, you just have to think that Fremantle will go with the two rucks, strategy, and and they'll just have to back their guys in to be able to sort of stop as you said, get the ball to ground, and then as Ross Lyon said on Monday night, just run, and as you said, I think it'll be one of those really probably a little bit like rugby, I think, and more so that just getting territory and just being able to get the ball in your forward 50 will just be crucial. And obviously, if it was at the smaller SCG, it'd be even more so with those clearances with only having one kick. But it'll be interesting to see how, because Sydney don't have a great record at ANZ Stadium either, and they obviously don't like playing there, but most of our guys haven't played there at all. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it. But I did like the little Pav's little who's your quote on the weekend, Seppo, during the week of the the goalpost at either end and a bit of grass in between, and what shall be shall be. So I think the boys have certainly got a bit of fire in the guts after what happened last year in the grand final, and I think they're certainly going to give every post a winner and try to obviously get that home prelim, which will be massive in terms of being able to get the victory.
It's a huge result. If we can get the win from here, it's really going to set up having a week off and be able to get our bodies and the rest right, because you're certainly going to need a want of rest after a big slog in the wet. And it certainly makes the task hard going back to back, getting the grand final after losing that first week. And even though you get the home advantage coming off a wet slog and then facing a Port or a Richmond, certainly makes it quite hard to do. But, strange things have happened, but we'll back our guys in because they just know what the prize is for getting a week off, and hopefully they can do the same thing as we did against Geelong. And maybe all these little things that are happening, like the plane being delayed, just provides a bit of extra motivation to get the job done.
Yeah, it'd be interesting as well, because obviously there's been a bit of talk during the week, and if you, as I said, when we were looking through that heat map, Seppo, looking inside 50s, Fremantle obviously try to get the ball right inside, right probably 15, 20 metres out directly in front, where a lot of sides do tend to push the ball out wide. And you noticed last week even Fremantle's use through the corridor was quite strong compared to Port, who tended to push the ball more around the outside of the wings. So it'll be interesting to see how much effort they do to try and continue to keep the ball on the inside the corridor, because obviously any turnover will be crucial in terms of the ball coming back over the head and giving Sydney having both sides of the ground in terms of being able to lead up into the space.
Certainly.
What do any other sort of tips or things you want to bring up, Seppo, before we go into the tips?
No, other than the fact that I'll be flying up Saturday morning. I just hope that my plane's not delayed as well, and I get up there smoothly. And it's going to be quite interesting because I've never been out to the ANZ Stadium before to watch a game. So obviously, I did watch the game when I was back in WA back in 2006, I believe, when they had the final against them. But it's going to be a different experience going up there. And there's actually quite a few tickets still available. Just reading the release today that there's still about 30,000 tickets. So this doesn't actually look like it's going to be a sellout. That means the atmosphere won't be as good, but we can, like they've been saying on the ads, we won't be going quietly, and the contingent of Freo supporters up there hopefully do a good job. And even though it won't be comfortable for me in the stands, I just hope it rains, because it will certainly help us and limit the tall forwards of Sydney.
Yeah, I think obviously, to be honest with you, I think if this game was at the SCG, I'd probably have Sydney probably an extra goal or two favourite. But I think having it out where it is, even though we haven't played there, it probably plays into our hands a little bit more. I think it would have been certainly a much tougher prospect for us at playing it at the SCG with that shortened ground with those bigger bodies down in the forward line. But I know that they can spread us out a little bit more down there, but I think it also does help us a little bit by not having that sort of massive atmosphere that you can have it even at the SCG. I remember that game versus Port, and it was a sort of cracking atmosphere where it'll be a bit of a lull out there, particularly for them in that finals. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, Seppo? What's your tip, mate?
With a huge amount of confidence, I'm going to tip Freo by a nail-biting 4-point win.
Oof, yeah, it's well, you probably got a little bit more confidence than I have. I really think I think it comes down a bit to the weather. I think if it's wet, I think Fremantle can probably get up. I'll probably halve your confidence, Seppo, so I'll say Fremantle by 2. But I do think if it's dry, I think we may struggle to contain their bigger forwards. I think the other interesting thing, Seppo, is obviously the game on Friday night. Although it doesn't directly affect us, I really do think if Geelong do manage to get over the top of Hawthorn, I think even if we do manage to get knocked off, I think it certainly opens it up a little bit for us. Certainly have a lot more confidence against Geelong if we, and this is a little bit down the track, obviously, but depending on whether we play Richmond or Port or whatever, you would feel more confidence having that pathway than if Hawthorn get up and then having to play Hawthorn in a prelim.
Definitely, yeah. There'd be one positive way to look at it if Geelong made it up on Friday night and we didn't get the result our way on. You'd certainly want to face Geelong. We've had the sort of wood over them for a bit and came close to that last result, but certainly facing them over here, say in 2 weeks' time, rather than getting the nice option of a home final. But you never know. It'd be funny if Geelong win, but then we win and we get the week off and maybe face Hawks in a couple of weeks' time. So you never know how it works out. So
yeah,
certainly going to make it interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and and as I said, for both teams, it will be interesting to see how they end up going. So,
what's your views on the last two other finals that are played? It's very hard to split North Melbourne and Essendon, but I think North might just have a bit over. You think Essendon have just not limped into the finals, but haven't looked too good, where North have probably had the better form against the bigger sides this year. So I'll probably tip North slightly ahead in that game.
I think
North might just have the advantage over the Tigers just being at home at the Adelaide Oval. I think the bubble's going to burst once again, second year in a row for Richmond supporters.
Yeah, I think going back to your original point, I think the only thing that would probably give Essendon, I think, a bit more hope is the fact that it's at the MCG. I think it was Eddie had. I think North played there a lot better, and I think North Melbourne have played at the MCG less than we have this year, which is saying something. So, but as you said, not having Harvey, even though we all sort of, most Freo supporters are sort of not big fans of him by any stretch. He is a bit of a barometer for them, and he will be a big loss on the day. Both these teams, you just don't know which one's going to turn up. It's really easy, just more mental than anything. They could turn up and be absolute, world beaters, or they could turn up and be absolutely poor as. So, it's definitely going to be a tip of the hat, flip of the coin for that one. And I do agree with you, Seppo. I think Port Adelaide are going to be a bit too strong for Richmond. I think Richmond have done pretty well to get to the finals. I mean, for us, realistically, if we did manage not to get up this week, I think, Richmond would probably be a better result for us than Port. I know that we beat Port last week. I think either result really wouldn't matter too much. But if you think about it, Richmond played Sydney last week, and then they've got to play in Adelaide this week, and then they've got to go back and play in Perth the week after,
We'll take the toll on them, yeah.
Well, you travel 3 weeks in a row, and I know for us we're used to it, but you know what it's like. Some of those sort of Victorian clubs get a bit precious after having travelled twice in a row, so let alone 3 games. But one thing for sure, certainly after the remarks that Chaplin did, depending on the result on Saturday for us, that you'll be hoping that both teams just belt the hell out of each other for the whole 4 quarters, and you'd think there's not going to be a lot of love lost once that game gets started there. So it'll be certainly on for young and old, and I think it'll probably be the most fiery of the 4 finals. Actually, I think the other game.
Actually, even though that you got Hawthorn and Geelong, a great rivalry, I actually think there's going to be a bit more into this Port Richmond one. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah, I think both got no second chance, so to speak, and I think Port are sort of keen to make amends from last year, and Richmond obviously losing to Carlton last year, which was even probably worse for them. So both teams have got a lot to prove, and I think it's certainly going to be I think all 4 games are going to be cracking games actually, but I think the North Essendon game is probably going to be the weaker out of the 4 games, to be honest. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But let's hope that our boys can go out and get the job done, and let's hope we can certainly do better than what Virgin did tonight with the planes. So get across there on time. All right, and is there anything happening before or after the game, Seppo, in Sydney? For those
no, it's going to be a quick fly and fly out. I don't know the area well, if there's going to be pre or post game drinks, but because it's a bit of an extra trek out to the western suburbs near your home bush, it's going to be hard with Sydney traffic to try and schedule some extra stuff in. So it's going to be straight to the stadium back for me. Yeah,
absolutely, and let's hope that most of the time in the finals we see it too, but let's just hope they go out and let the best team win, and there's no sort of crappy decisions for any team out there. And as I said, we can let the players decide which is going to be the best way to go. And be interesting to see what happens this week. Obviously, after all the talk with Goods and his staging, during the week, Seppo, to see whether what happens when he goes near the ball that first time. And
Yeah, certainly. With that wet, you don't want him diving too much, or he'll be called into the Olympic diving team. So
that's it. I mean, the other interesting thing I think, Seppo, as well, is if it is wet, I think the 16.5 point line for Fremantle, I think that's going to be pretty good value, to be honest, at $1.90. I think particularly if it is wet, I think we're a very big chance to cover at that.
I can't see it blowing out, even with our key defenders missing. So it's going to be a good one, and I look forward to it. And for all the people back in Perth and Melbourne watching the game that aren't going to be there, I hope you enjoy it.
Absolutely, and let's hope that obviously all the Fremantle fans get out and manage to either watch it at the pubs or at friends' places and enjoy the game. And let's hope we can celebrate like we did last year when we played Geelong. The other interesting point was that obviously all the talk about Jono not playing, Seppo, but Jono missed the game against Geelong last year as well in the qualifying final, ironically. So, granted, we had Luke then, but
He was underdone too.
Yeah, so it'll be certainly interesting to see how we go, and let's hope that the boys can do it. All right, that's it for this week. So thanks again for joining us, Seppo.
No worries, and I'll speak to you next week.
Absolutely, and thanks for joining us. And for all the listeners out there, thanks for joining us, and get on board the Big Footy forums, and obviously let your opinions be known, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye for now.